is JS Party, your weekly celebration of JavaScript and the web. Check us out on the web at jsparty.fm. There you'll find lists of our recommended and popular episodes, clips, and a request form, so you can let us know what you want to hear about on the pod. Big thanks to our partners at Fly.io. Over 3 million apps have launched on Fly. Learn how at Fly.io. Okay, hey, it's party time, y'all.
Hey friends, you know we're big fans of Fly.io, and I'm here with Kurt Mackey, co-founder and CEO of Fly. Kurt, we've had some conversations, and I've heard you say that public clouds suck. What is your personal lens into public clouds sucking, and how does Fly not suck?
All right, so public clouds suck. I actually think most ways of hosting stuff on the internet sucks. And I have a lot of theories about why this is, but it almost doesn't matter. The reality is if I've built a new app for generating sandwich recipes because my family's just into specific types of sandwiches that use Braunschweiger as a component, for example. And then I want to put that somewhere. You go to AWS and it's harder than just going and getting a dedicated server from Hetzner. It's actually more complicated to figure out how to deploy my dumb sandwich app on top of AWS because it's not built for me as a developer to be productive with. It's built for other people. It's built for platform teams to kind of build the infrastructure of their dreams and hopefully create a new UX that's useful for the developers that they work with. And again, I feel like every time I talk about this, it's I'm just too impatient. I don't particularly want to go figure so many things out purely to put my sandwich app in front of people. And I don't particularly want to have to go talk to a platform team once my sandwich app becomes a huge startup and IPOs and I have to do a deploy. I kind of feel like all that stuff should just work for me without me having to go ask permission or talk to anyone else. And so this has informed a lot of how we've built Fly. We're still a public cloud. We still have a lot of very similar low-level primitives as the bigger guys. But in general, they're designed to be used directly by developers. They're not built for a platform team to kind of cobble together. They're designed to be useful quickly for developers. One of the ways we've thought about this is if you can turn a very difficult problem into a 2-hour problem, people will build much more interesting types of apps. And so this is why we've done things like made it easy to run an app multi-region. Most companies don't run multi-region apps on public clouds because it's functionally impossible to do without a huge amount of upfront effort. It's why we've made things like the virtual machine primitives behind just a simple API. Most people don't do code sandboxing or their own virtualization because it's just not really easy. There's just no path to that on top of the clouds. So in general, I feel it's not really fair of me to say public clouds suck because they were built for a different time. If you build one of these things starting in 2007, the world's very different than it is right now. And so a lot of what I'm saying, I think, is that public clouds are kind of old. And there's a new version of public clouds that we should all be building on top of that are definitely going to make me as a developer much happier than I was 5 or 6 years ago when I was kind of stuck in this quagmire.
So AWS was built for a different era, a different cloud era, and Fly, a public cloud, yes, but a public cloud built for developers who ship. That's a difference. And we here at Changelog are developers who ship. So you should trust us. Try out Fly, Fly.io. Over 3 million apps, that includes us, have launched on Fly. They leverage the global Anycast load balancing, the zero config private networking, hardware isolation, instant WireGuard VPN connections with push button deployments, scaling to thousands of instances. This is the cloud you want. Check it out. Fly.io. Again, Fly.io.
Hello world, I'm Jerod, your internet friend, and I'm joined today by Tomek Sułkowski. Welcome to the show.
Hello, hi everyone, hi Jerod.
Happy to have you, founding engineer, DevRel, and DevX at StackBlitz.
Correct.
We've done a show on StackBlitz, I think it was a couple years ago. Recorded May 27th, 2021. This is when StackBlitz first hit the scene. That episode's called Running Node Natively in the Browser with Eric Simons. So, a companion of yours, I'm sure?
Oh yeah, good friend too. Yeah, 21 was crazy with web containers.
Long time ago. So StackBlitz still out there, still doing your thing. Today we're going to talk about TutorialKit, which is a StackBlitz open source joint. But first, catch us up with StackBlitz, what you all do, what you're up to, and what your work looks like.
Okay, so maybe to recap a couple of years in a couple of sentences, we started up as a kind of like an online playground for a couple of specific technologies. We picked the most popular one initially, React, Angular. I think we had Ionic, that was the first three. Then we had a couple of new ones when Vue started getting popular. But that was all very custom thing based on System.js. So like with every custom thing, you had to re-implement a lot of logic, update it, and maintain.
For each new thing, right?
Yeah. And still hit a lot of limitations. So that's when in 2021, after I think like a good year or more of R&D, we've come up with web container. And web containers are super high level overview. They're in a browser operating system. So imagine like a typical elements of OS, file system, network layer, and couple of typical programs that you might find on OS like Git and things like that, working on the front end in your browser. So of course we targeted Node specifically, and the idea was to kind of provide everything that Node needs to run normally locally, to run this in the browser. That way we wouldn't have to, make all these bundlers and custom browser specific things, especially as, the backend in JavaScript became like a very common thing to do. So since 2021, we've been building basically on top of web containers, experimenting with a couple of stuff, both on the editor side and with the engine itself. So for example, last year, we've released an experimental Python support. So you can actually run Python scripts in StackBlitz right now. There is a starter. You can go to, I think, vanilla group in StackBlitz starters, and there's Python, and I think even WordPress plugin, something like this. We have also some experimental PHP support. So interesting stuff around that, yeah.
Yeah. And so these web containers, I think, are what are enabling this project TutorialKit. Is this on top of web containers? At least part of it is, right?
Yes, exactly. It kind of consists of two very cool technologies we can dive into in a second. But I think also interesting thing is how we got there, because basically a piece of web containers development was dictated by tutorials about 2 years ago, I think, or even longer. But let's start from the beginning. So you might have seen, even if you're not into Svelte, you might have seen a Svelte tutorial. It was basically the primary way for people to learn Svelte since its inception in over 5 years ago. That was created primarily by Rich Harris, who is a great communicator and educator.
Right.
So he built that, I think, inspired by Knockout from even more back in the day.
Yes. I know Knockout. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. That was so cool, to remember these things. But anyways, so he built this amazing tutorial. And if you look at any of his talks, actually YouTube recordings, any demos, he's using that tutorial himself as a starting point, even to demo specific parts of the framework. So it's not only for beginners and people who are just onboarding into the technology, but it's also for an advocate as himself. So it's a very, very cool concept, cool tool. But now, if you know anything about Svelte, the most common way of using Svelte is by using SvelteKit right now, right?
Right.
And SvelteKit has a very significant backend layer. So now we're kind of coming back around to web containers because it was kind of impossible to build a new tutorial for SvelteKit without having the Node aspect. So Rich Harris reached out to us and asked if there is some way of using web containers outside of stackbeats.com.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, that was our design partner for creating web containers API, and now so you can use this technology, this engine on your website, building whatever you want to build. If you imagine if you had an OS on your website, right? So people started building very interesting projects on top of it, like their own code editors and playgrounds. And there's a project that provides you details on any package, something like Bundlephobia, but it's using web containers to actually download the package in the browser and provide you with the proper information about the structure and what it downloaded. So the direct inspiration for Web Containers API were the tutorials built by Rich Harris, but then it became a very universal tool. Mm-hmm. And since SvelteKit tutorial was such a big success, people from other teams, for other frameworks, were also inspired by it. And there is now, I think, since beginning of this year, there is an interactive Angular tutorial. If you go to angular.dev, they have a cool new documentation and an interactive tutorial that looks very similar in structure and functionality to the SvelteKit. And there's also a very cool tutorial in progress built by Anthony Fu from the Next team. Mm-hmm. You can see that in he streamed that. I think there was 10 videos series. You can find it on YouTube where he actually built the tutorial app from scratch. And again, if you look at it, it takes him a lot of time, a lot of hours, and it's not a trivial app. But you end up with something similar to SvelteKit tutorial, similar to Angular tutorial. So we took a look at this and it's kind of not something that we usually do anymore as developers, building the same structures from scratch, right? We usually we have a framework for everything right now.
Right.
So that's what gave us the ultimate push to create a framework for building tutorials. So
cool.
That's TutorialKit in a bit, maybe with a bunch of history on top of it.
Yeah, the background. Well, that's interesting to know. And if anybody has seen a Svelte tutorial, I haven't seen the Angular one specifically, but they're powerful learning tools. They're interactive. Like you said, these aren't simple apps. There's a multiple panes. The panes are interacting. There's code execution going on. There's reflection. There's all kinds of things that are going on that have to make that happen. So I love that less people need to worry about that in order to get awesome tutorials out into the world and in the browser, which is so powerful, right? Because there's no curl this and pipe it to that and download this or fire up Docker. It's just if you can run it in the browser, that's a huge win. And we've seen a lot of different playgrounds and tutorials moving into the browser, traditionally back-end tools, right? SQLite in the browser via WASM. There's people putting Postgres in the browser, all these different things. You guys have Node, a full Node environment in the browser. Just briefly, how does the web containers thing work? Is it similar to WebAssembly? Is it completely different? Are you downloading everything into a browser like a Docker container or?
Yeah, just the name might be implying something like this, but we have a way easier work because if you think about it, Node itself is already a wrapper around the browser engine, right? So when you download Node, a ton of what you're downloading is basically like a kind of a copy, let's say, of your browser. Mm-hmm. And since we are already running in a browser, we can already use this engine. So it's down to us only to implement the missing parts. So that's why it's it's actually more performant. It's kind of non-intuitive if you think about it, because we've all used a bunch of native apps and like desktop apps and browser apps, and very often the native apps are like, you think of them as faster, more performant. You don't have like a heavy weight like video editing apps in the browser yet. Maybe you do already, but it's not something that you think about this way. But we've heard from a lot of people who are on like low-end machines that they're using StackBlitz because their, let's say, like traditional setup of VS Code, which has like built on top of Electron itself. So you have already one engine, then like you have Node, another engine, and then you have the browser. So it kind of sometimes kills the lower end computers, while like in StackBlitz, we use just one browser. So there's
one less browser because there's no local node. You don't need local node.
Yeah.
You have the in-browser.
Yeah, kind of like two even, because the editor itself is also using
Oh, I see. Right. So VS Code unnecessary.
Yeah.
So you have just a browser.
And it's
free for the price of one.
Yes, exactly. And WASM, in fact, yes, as you asked, it like WASM plays a big part. Actually, like that's both the, let's say, limitation or like the rules that web containers has to play by, and what is possible in web containers is basically if there is a WASM version of such a specific binary, then we can run it. That's, for example, why the Python support was possible, because there is a Python WASM version of Python. And besides that, yeah, we do have to implement some of this stuff on our own. Our web container engineers are high-level specialists in like Node spec at this point, because if you've ever seen like a URL parsing spec, you know.
I have. Unfortunately, I have seen a URL parsing spec.
Yeah. So you know, like it's funny because there are some things where actually browser kind of implements it differently than the Node, for example, and then like you have to do an exception for this, and it's interesting. Like the event loop also is something that we've spent like weeks of work on just this, and like different version of it to make sure like it's airtight.
Because Node's event loop works differently than the browser V8's event loop works. How do you rectify that?
That's
who knows?
You'd have to get Dominic Elm, for example, from our team to have one podcast just on event loop.
Right.
Yeah.
That one section of the code base that nobody else touches because it works right now. So let's leave it alone.
You could do it probably maybe on like Halloween as a scary episode.
Yeah, spooky code sessions. Yeah, I could imagine. Well, the cool thing about TutorialKit, as I said earlier, is that anybody now using this tool, which you all have open source and made available, can have rich interactive tutorials for their library. I imagine you could use it for your design system or your overall UI that you have for your business. You could use it for educational resources, right? Like Rich Harris does, making demos, filming your own stuff. There's tons of different use cases for TutorialKit, and most of the heavy lifting, maybe all of the heavy lifting, except for the whole like, how should I communicate my tutorial, has been done. The hard work has been done. And because of web containers, you can run it, I assume, on or off StackBlitz, right? Now you don't need StackBlitz necessarily to get this done.
Yeah, there's no like connection to StackBlitz.com, as in like you don't go to the StackBlitz.com domain. The web containers themselves do request our part, because if you want to like download NPM packages, we handle that package management, but not necessarily as well, because we work with several enterprises that have their specific requirements, so you can already imagine what I'm gonna say, but working with their own nexuses, their own private packages behind company firewalls, so airtight installations and things like that. So that's possible as well.
What's up, friends? I'm here with a good friend of mine, Michael Greenwich, CEO and founder of WorkOS. WorkOS is the all-in-one enterprise SSO and a whole lot more solution for everyone, from a brand new startup to a enterprise and all the AI apps in between. So Michael, when is too early or too late to begin to think about being enterprise ready?
It's not just a single point in time where people make this transition. It occurs at many steps of the business. Enterprise single sign-on, like SAML, auth, you usually don't need that until you have users. You're not going to need that when you're getting started. And we call it an enterprise feature, but I think what you'll find is there's companies, when you sell to like a 50-person company, they might want this. They actually, especially if they care about security, they might want that capability in it. So it's more of like SMB features even, if they're tech forward. At WorkOS, we provide a ton of other stuff that we give away for free for people earlier in their life cycle. We just don't charge you for it. So that auth kit stuff I mentioned, that identity service, we give that away for free up to 1 million users, 1 million users. And this competes with Auth0 and other platforms that have much, much lower free plans. I'm talking like 10,000, 50,000, like we give you 1 million free because we really want to give developers the best tools and capabilities to build their products faster, and to go to market much, much faster. And where we charge people money for the service is on these enterprise things. If you end up being successful and grow and scale up market, that's where we monetize. And that's also when you're making money as a business. So we really like to align, our incentives across that. So we have people using AuthKit that are brand new apps, just getting started, companies in Y Combinator, side projects, hackathon things, things that are not necessarily commercial focused, but could be someday. They're kind of future-proofing their tech stack by using WorkOS. On the other side, we have companies much, much later that are really big who typically don't like us talking about them, their logos, because they're big customers. But they say, hey, we tried to build this stuff, or we have some existing technology, but we're sort of unhappy with it. The developer that built it maybe has left. I was talking last week with a company that does over $1 billion in revenue each year, and their SCIM connection, the user provisioning, was written last summer by an intern who's no longer obviously at the company, and the thing doesn't really work. And so they're looking for a solution for that. So there's a really wide spectrum. We'll serve companies that are in their office is in a coffee shop or their living room, all the way through they have their own building in downtown San Francisco or New York or something. And it's the same platform, same technology, same tools on both sides. The volume is obviously different. And sometimes the way we support them from a kind of customer support perspective is a little bit different. Their needs are different, but same technology, same platform, just like AWS, right? You can use AWS and pay them $10 a month. You can also pay them $10 million a month. Same product.
Or more, for sure.
Or more.
Well, no matter where you're at on your enterprise ready journey, WorkOS has a solution for you. They're trusted by Perplexity, Copy.ai, Loom, Vercel, Indeed, and so many more. You can learn more and check them out at workos.com. That's WORKOS.com. Again, workos.com.
So let's imagine that I'm a library author and I have a new web component that I want to get out there and get used, and I want to set up a tutorial for it. Maybe it's a complicated one. It's a calendaring web component that builds an entire calendar into your browser. Where do I start? What do I do?
So you can probably just YOLO it and run.
Just YOLO it?
Try to... Without reading the manual, you can run npm create tutorial. So basically, if you didn't know anything like how to create tutorial, that's, I think, the most intuitive thing you could guess.
Well, that's pretty simple. Yeah. You don't even need a tutorial on how to build the tutorial. You just npm create it. And I did read some of the docs. It looks like it's pretty well laid out in terms of you create this outline format that's basically like file structure based, right? Like there's like a tree of files and you figure out your tutorial. Maybe there's 3 parts and, part 1 has 3 subsections, which have 2 things inside of them, some sort of tree, like an outline. And then you just like create files and folders in the style of that outline, right? Is that as easy as it is?
Precisely. That's why I said YOLO it. Like that's how I like to do it. I like to first try, bump against maybe some issues, and then go back to documentation, which TutorialKit has a really great and up-to-date documentation, which is not always the case with some of the stuff that we've been experimenting in the past. So
yeah, it's the open source world,
Yeah, exactly.
Documentation varies.
Yeah, but what you said about the folder structure, we approach it from developer experience point of view, with that being the first class like citizen. So I was building tutorial all the time while we were developing the library. So we had hit a lot of these issues very early on and ironed it out before making it public. So for example, okay, let's start from the content. You've created npm create a tutorial. It installed everything. You have the file structure scaffolded. You can go to VS Code and start editing. There is a source folder in that you have content and first chapter, first lesson, and things like that.
Right.
Every lesson description is a markdown file. You can also use MDX if you want to have some custom components. So that's that left pane when you look at any tutorial. And then on the right, you have the coding environment. So there is a code editor, file tree, and interactive preview. And to display anything in there, in the lesson folder, you have a files subfolder, and whatever you put in files will appear in the interactive part of the tutorial, in the file tree and the editor. So that sounds like, okay, the way to go, right? But once you start developing that tutorial and building more and more lessons, you will quickly have a lot of boilerplate to copy between each lesson. So imagine like you have a Vite project, so you have like some Vite configuration files, some additional things, package manager, package.json. That's pretty much constant. Probably the only thing that the student cares about is something from the source folder. So for that, we have also a special templates folder. And in the template, you put that reusable code that is applied to every lesson. You can also have several templates and use them on different lessons, different chapters, and things like that.
Yeah, that's really nice because we've all felt the pain of having, I think copy paste is fine when you're just getting started and you have a handful of steps or sections. We've all felt the pain of getting down the road and then realizing we want to change something general about the entire tutorial. And then it's that global find and replace moment where it's like, do you want to update 27 files? And it's like, yes, but then I also want to tweak it and see what it looks like. I mean, just this is bad developer experience. So having built-in templating is a huge win. I'm glad you guys did that to get started for folks.
Yeah, and so I mentioned that you can have several templates. So now the question is, okay, how does TutorialKit know which template to use, right? So of course we enter the realm of configuration, and that's another interesting DX question, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So for the configuration, you can actually configure on every lesson. There's at this point, I think like 15 things you can configure, as in like, do you want to show the preview even? But maybe your tutorial is like CLI only, for a CLI only tool, so you don't need that preview aspect. Or maybe for a specific lesson, there's like an intro page and you don't even need the editor. So you'd want to turn on or off several things. The other popular setting is if you display like 5 files because they're relevant, but the most important file is the file number 3 on that list, like app.js, and you don't necessarily want to show the index HTML every time. You can define which files should be open by default in the editor. And again, if you imagine that in a bigger tutorial with like 30 or 40 lessons, setting that one file, probably that might be like 1 or 3 files distributed in different lessons, would be tedious. So you can define almost every configuration variable on a lesson, a chapter, and tutorial level. So you can define it just once for the whole tutorial, and you don't have to set this. So it's kind of like inheriting of the configuration.
Yeah, this is a situation where inheritance, even if it's just conceptual inheritance, maybe cascading is the way we can think about it.
Yeah.
Makes a ton of sense and is very useful, especially in tree, anything that's tree structured. It makes a ton of sense to just trickle it down to all your children. Then let's say, okay, I got my thing done, and maybe I just npm created it, and then I followed the rabbit trail to all these different markdown files, and I'm done. I got my tutorial ready to go. And now I want to share it with the world.
Yeah, sure. You won't be sending the localhost URL, of course.
Just expose a port on my laptop and send it out there?
Yes. So that's the other piece of the technology. The first being the engine, which is web container. The other cool thing, and I think good news for everyone, for every listener that is into a JS ecosystem, is built on top of Astro. So that kind of answers a lot of questions if you've ever heard about Astro. But if you haven't, you run npm run build command, and that creates a static Astro folder. So it's basically a static site right now, since now, and you can put it on any hosting provider. You can configure a CI to build it, of course, and things like that. So wherever you can host Astro, wherever you can host an index HTML file, you can host your TutorialKit project. So again, you don't have to put it on stackbits.com by any means. This can be a part of your documentation site. That's actually the best scenario. That's what we recommend.
So you were inspired by Svelte and SvelteKit, but you're built with Astro.
Yeah, true.
Curious.
Good point. Yeah, I think we were mostly focused on having a very simple code structure and focused on specific markdown files. So when we looked at what Astro does with projects like Starlight, where this file routing for markdown and MDX files is like a commonplace. Plus they have a lot of built-in components that are pretty close to what TutorialKit does, like documenting code specifically. This all comes with Astro. So that was kind of our main reasoning behind this.
So once you have your Astro build, you're ready to distribute static files, and you put it up on any host that hosts static files. Are you done at that point? Is there no server-side requirements at all?
There's one thing that you have to set. That's possible on most or almost every hosting platform. I know GitHub Pages doesn't have this, so that's one exclusion. But for Vercel, Cloudflare, Netlify, you have to set up specific headers. So that these headers are required for web containers to work. And we have this documented both in web containers documentation, like main StackBits documentation, and on tutorialkit.dev. So there's even specific configuration for each of the common hosting providers. But that's the only thing, really.
Cool.
Well, there's no shortage of helpful AI tools out there. But using these AI tools means you got to switch back and forth between yet one more tool. So instead of simplifying your workflow, it just gets more complicated. But that's not how it works when you're using Notion. Notion combines your notes, your docs, your projects, and it puts it all in one space that's simple and beautiful and easy to use. And the new Notion AI has the capabilities of multiple AI tools built into one single tool, which means you can search, you can generate, you can analyze, you can summarize, you can chat, all inside Notion. One thing I really enjoy about Notion is being able to summarize pages. I feel like personally, summarization is the killer AI feature, and Notion AI is connected to multiple knowledge sources. It uses AI knowledge from GPT-4 and Claude to chat with you about any topic. It can search across thousands of Notion docs in seconds to quickly answer that one question you have. And with AI connectors now in beta from Notion, Notion AI can search across Slack discussions, Google Documents, Sheets, and Slides, and more tools like GitHub and Jira. Those are coming soon. These other specialized tools or legacy suites, they have you bouncing between 6 different applications. And Notion, for me, is seamless. It's integrated, infinitely flexible, and beautifully easy to use. So you're empowered to do your most meaningful work all in one single tool with Notion AI built right in. And Teams is where it's at for Notion. Teams that use Notion send less emails, they cancel more meetings, they save more time searching for their work, and they reduce their spending on all these different tools, which helps everyone stay on the same page. So try Notion for free when you go to notion.com/JSParty. That's all lowercase letters, notion.com/JSParty to try the powerful, easy to use Notion AI today. And when you use our link, you're supporting our show, JS Party. I know you love it. Again, notion.com/JS Party.
Another thing I noticed, which I thought was neat, worth highlighting, is that you have available components, React components to use that you use to build TutorialKit, but they're the different subcomponents of TutorialKit. And so if people want just, for instance, the file browser or the editor window or like different sections, the different panes to build into something else that's not a tutorial or whatever, you can grab and go with those, right?
Yes, because so obviously we've built stackviz.com. In stackviz.com, we've built like the file tree, the Fox browser and things like that. Then when we started doing TutorialKit, we've built it again from scratch, and we realized there's a lot of people that are doing this, and it will be useful for other folks as well. If you want to build like a lightweight editor in your project, in your library, like why not use something that we've already. TutorialKit is also open source, so it made sense to make the parts of it more easy to consume if you want to rearrange and build your own stuff.
Well, it looks really cool. It almost looks feature complete. Is this thing like baked, or are you still cooking it up? Are there more parts to TutorialKit coming?
It never will be baked. There's like so many. No. And like, but joking aside, we have a roadmap to 1.0, which is close. I think within like this this month, whatever month this goes like.
October, the month of
like
October?
Probably October.
There you go.
Yeah, I think within October we should be on 1.0, but even after that we have quite a lot of ideas / requests from the early users to add here. So, but you can certainly build like a Svelte kit-like tutorial right now. And one additional thing, if you want to start doing building TutorialKit, it's best to do it in VS Code with a dedicated TutorialKit extension. That's something that we've also added based on our initial experiences.
What does that afford you?
All right, so when we started like working on our first tutorials, we realized that even traversing that file structure, that the folder structure for lessons and everything, even though it's like as minimal as possible, it's still quite a lot of jumping around. So the first thing that TutorialKit gives you is an outline. It displays your tutorial outline in the side panel, and when you click it, you jump directly to the markdown description of file of a given lesson, plus the specific part of the file tree is also activated, focused, so you don't have to look for specific folders, changes of folders and things like that. So traversing is the first thing, then creating a lesson. Again, for each lesson, even if it's like we use the templates, we use the configuration on the top level, you still, for every lesson, have to create a content MD file and the files folder every time. So why not just, right click, add new lesson, name the lesson. So lesson creation, removing lessons. In the future, we want also like a drag and drop to rearrange the lesson order if you want to do so. Mm-hmm. And finally, last but not least, is I mentioned there's like over a dozen of configuration options. And these options are set in the front matter of your Markdown file. And if you've worked with front matter, you probably know that it's not like TypeScript, to say the least, right?
Yeah, you can just typo something and
Yes. So
silently fail.
Not anymore. Thanks to the extension, we've implemented language service something. I didn't do it.
Language service protocol?
Yes. I was only a consumer for this one. But thanks to this, you have auto-completion, errors, squigglies, if, the types or whatever are wrong. So, yeah, that's the big one.
There you are, doing developer experience again.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And but actually, just to give additional props, like in parallel, Astro team worked out a very similar solution. So I don't know if this is specifically, I don't remember if this is specifically for Starlight or generally for Astro. I think it might be for Astro collections. So if you have Astro collections, their extension also can do this as well. So we're kind of coming out of the dark ages of front matter.
So are you all using this inside of StackBlitz? Are you scratching an itch? Are you just providing something for the community? What's the motivation? I know that Rich Harris asked about it, but that's not usually good enough for most people to go out and dedicate a bunch of resources to some software. It's a pretty good reason.
Yeah, it's a mix of a lot of these things, actually. I think there is funnily enough, for a company that moves this fast, and like we have a lot of high priority things that are actually there's some secrets that will be announced on this VidConf. So that will be after this podcast goes
coming up
live.
soon.
Yes.
VidConf, okay.
And it's something entirely different than TutorialKit, but there is, I think, a big need in us. Like first 5 people in StackBlitz, if I remember correctly, were all educators. So we all started by doing this, and the initial idea behind StackBlitz was to give people a tool so they don't have to set up all these things locally and can just start learning the freaking React, right? And so there is a sense of mission behind it. But now that we have it, we also scratch our itch. So there is a tutorial on using Web Container API, on using StackBlitz SDK. I do a lot of general browser CSS tips, a lot on Twitter and such. So I've built some CSS tutorials as well. Yeah, but it's also I think a very cool showcase of what Web Containers is capable of. So yeah, once we got the idea, we just couldn't not do it.
Love it. Well, there is a demo tutorial out there, speaking of CSS, which walks you through some of the basic functionality of TutorialKit as you style up some forms. So I went through that one this morning and just got a lay of the land. Very familiar. I'm not sure if I've gone through specifically Svelte's tutorial, but I like that there's becoming kind of this pattern or trend of how these things flow. And honestly, now that TutorialKit exists, it may have the bootstrap effect. The bootstrap effect was a downside because we want to have unique and different experiences on our websites. Yeah. But you go to our websites and they all look like a bootstrap site with different color scheme applied, and different logo. And that's not great when you're trying to stand out from the crowd. But when you're trying to make a tutorial that's familiar for folks, actually having it uniform in the way it presents, and of course you can theme and style these, is actually a big win because I immediately understood here's the text on the left, here's the interactive part on the right, and the lower right is the terminal. Here's your output. It was all very CodePen-ish, I don't know who started this trend. Maybe it was Svelte, but feels like a CodePen or a JS Fiddle with additional instruction. And I like that. I like how it's uniform. And I think as more people build these out, it's going to be a win for the cognitive load. I mean, we already got to learn so much stuff, right? There's so much to learn. Don't make me learn how to use your tutorial.
Yeah, fair point. But yeah, that's a great point. One metaphor or mental model that I have for this is storybook also, if you think about it. Like before Storybook, usually you would build like some workbench, like privately to work on a component faster, but it usually wouldn't get published. And once Storybook like came to stay seen, now like every component library has a Storybook project, and they look the same pretty much, plus minus some plugins. Yeah, speaking of, we also have a quite extensive theming capabilities, so you can change things around, but like in the same structure, which I think, as you said, it's a good thing.
That is a good thing. Well, the website is tutorialkit.dev. Check it out. Open source, free to use. There's really no reason not to give it a try if you have to build a tutorial for whatever your use case, whether you're at work trying to help your fellow colleagues understand the thing that you built for them, or you're trying to educate the next group of awesome web devs out there. Tomek, anything else that we didn't cover on this topic before we call it a show?
I can mention maybe some implementations of some people who have already built tutorials with that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So one of our engineers that is building TutorialKit, he's currently leading the effort, the open source part of it. His name is Ari Perke. He built a Vite plugin tutorial. So if you've used Vite, you've probably used some plugin, and you might have wondered how to build plugins. So now you can do a tutorial and actually learn that. So there is a tutorial-vite-plugin.pages.dev. So it's on Cloudflare, so pages dev, tutorial Vite plugin. And I think the biggest one, because as I think you've mentioned before, coming up with the actual content is now the only remaining challenge.
Yeah, it's still the hard part, but it's the only hard part.
Exactly. So it's interesting now because it's unlike most of other, I think, tools in that space. We've introduced TutorialKit first 2 months ago, and there are still not so many baked tutorials.
Sure.
Because people are still working on the content. So I'm always looking for the biggest one, the most developed one. So, and I think the one that I've seen is learn.remult, remult.dev.
Okay.
So yeah, it's quite extensive one, but there's several in progress as well. There's nextpatterns.dev. That's looking promising, especially considering how big Next is. So yeah. Also, if you're interested in what Tutorial does or do not do, visit our GitHub repository. We have both issues and discussions are quite dynamic, so you can ask questions. You can share your projects, and we will showcase it on StackBlitz as well.
Yeah, that is awesome. It'd be cool to get together a list. I'm sure you're going to be collecting them. Send me the links to all those things for the show notes so people can click through easily to those existing tutorials. And to our listener, if you create a tutorial using TutorialKit, let Tomek and the team know about it. They would love to know about it. Looks like you have a pretty active GitHub, 6 open pull requests, 39 issues, so people are participating and talking about it, even though you're not at 1.0 quite yet. So it's new, it's ready for it to be used, and they are continuing to advance it. So that's all good stuff. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, telling all of us about this very awesome tool you all built, and hopefully people get out there and figure out their content and get some tutorials posted.
Yeah, there's one last reason not to write. So
that's right, one less reason. Unfortunately, now we have no more excuses as to why we haven't finished that stinking tutorial yet, except for it's hard to write words down. Yep. All right. Well, on behalf of Tomek Sułkowski and the StackBlitz team, the TutorialKit team, I'm Jerod. This is JS Party, and we'll talk to y'all on the next one. September's gone, and your shot at free changelog stickers went with it. However, we will be attending All Things Open at the end of October. If you are too, find us there. I'm sure we'll have a bunch of JS Party stickers with us. If you'd like to go, but don't have a ticket yet, we have a few free ones to give away to our community. Sign up at changelog.com/community and introduce yourself in our new Zulip chat and we'll hook you up. We also have a 20% discount code if you'd prefer to go that route. The code is MediaChangelog20. Use that at registration. I don't know if it's case sensitive, but if it is, that's capital MEDIA, capital CHANGELOG20. No spaces. Thanks again to our partners at Fly.io, to our Beat Freak, The Goat, Breakmaster Cylinder, and of course to our longtime partners at Sentry. Use code changelog, save $100 on the Sentry team plan. Next up on the pod, K-Ball and I discuss the news. Vue creator Evan Yu's newly announced company, the WordPress mess continues, and more. Stay tuned right here. We'll have that episode ready for you next week.